Welcome to You, Me, Empathy. Thank you for listening. We would like to remind you that this podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Known as just a silly boy with a feely heart. Please consider supporting the show. Check us out on Patreon or simply leave a review on iTunes. Here's your host and creator of the show, Known Wells.
Hello, feely humans. Welcome to another episode of You, Me, Empathy. My name is Known Wells, and this is episode 129 on creative constraints, human resilience, and schizophrenia with my guest, Esmé Weijun Wang. Esmé is amazing. She's an award-winning author, New York Times bestselling author of The Border of Paradise, and most recently, The Collected Schizophrenias, which I'm reading now and almost done with, and it's great and wonderful, and it's part memoir and part really deep research dive into the schizophrenias, schizoaffective disorder, etc., and it's a must-read book. I highly recommend it. And this is a must-listen episode. Esmé and I, we actually talk about coronavirus, because this episode recorded right when sort of like the stay-at-home orders kind of started up in San Francisco, and then sort of trickled down from there. So we talked about that. We talk about creativity and constraints. We talk about 90s online communities. Hello, LiveJournal. We talk about how beautifully resilient humans are, hallucinations as kidnapping the senses, and we talk about Esmé's schizoaffective disorder diagnosis and her experience with that. This is a really wonderful, insightful episode, and I really hope you enjoy it. And make sure to read Esmé's books, The Border of Paradise and The Collected Schizophrenias. Make sure to follow her online. She's on Instagram at Esmé W. Wang. That's ESMEW Wang. And on Twitter at Esmé Wang. And I hope you really enjoy this episode. Before we get to it, though, I wanted to remind you that in just over 2 weeks, the Feely Human Collective will be out to the public. I am very excited. Today, in fact, I am hopefully finishing up the first draft of my free workshop on empathy, and it's very long, but it's chock full of amazing stuff and stories that I haven't told before, and I hope you really enjoy it. But less than 2 weeks, you guys, or a little over 2 weeks, rather. feelyhuman.co is where you go to learn more about that and to sign up for the newsletter in advance. I'm really excited to share that with all of you. The other thing is make sure to subscribe to You, Me, Empathy if you're not subscribed, and leave a rating and review. It really does help out the podcast. I put a lot of effort into this show every single week, and I really appreciate rating and review. It really does help out the show. I promise. So please, if you enjoy the show at all, please go over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and review. And I love you. Thank you for that. Okay. I think that's it. Let's get to episode 129 with my guest, Esmé Weijun Wang, on creative constraints, human resilience, and schizophrenia. Welcome to You, Me, Empathy, a podcast about exploring the struggles we face in our day-to-day lives as humans trying to get by on this wondrous and overwhelming pale blue dot. The intent of Yumi Empathy is to talk openly, without judgment, about our mental health, our neuroses, our shared anxieties and worries, to create a dialogue that is vulnerable and deeply human and empathetic, and to share that dialogue with others to inspire emotional and cognitive collaboration and insight, so we can, hand in hand, break down the stigma that make us feel shame and guilt for struggling, for feeling our feelings, for being feely humans. Yumi Empathy is a safe, friendly space designed to inspire the beauty in each of us. Today, my heart is full to be here with the multi-award winning writer, resilient, feely human, and author of the Grey Wolf Press nonfiction prize winning book, The Collected Schizophrenias. It's Esmé Wang. Hello, Esmé.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you. It's been a long time coming. I've been reaching out to you for a while, and I'm just so grateful to have you here.
Yeah, I mean, I think today is the perfect time in that it's a weird time and kind of reminds us that that just like every day is so fragile. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're exactly right. And let's jump right into it, because we always kick off the show with an emotional check-in. How are you feeling with everything going on and all of that?
Yeah, so just to remind everyone, in case people from the future are listening to this and have no idea what we're referring to, this is being recorded during the time of the coronavirus pandemic. And I was just telling you that I found out about half an hour ago that the Bay Area, which is where I live, the San Francisco Bay Area, just declared a shelter in place, which means that people are not allowed to leave the house unless for urgent matters. And so we're planning on staying in the house for the next 3 weeks, which is how long the shelter in place is going to last for now. It could be longer, but I'm pretty used to being at home. So as someone who's dealt with chronic illness and has been pretty disabled for long periods of time, I am very used to not leaving the house for weeks or months, or, even not leaving my bed for long periods of time. But I think what's different about this is how everybody else is included, and there's so much anxiety and this feeling of apocalypse, which is something that I'm not used to. I think that for the last, few years after Trump's election, there has been this ongoing stress, and the news cycle has been going on and on and on. And with this, I think, pandemic in particular, it feels more apocalyptic than usual.
Yeah. No, and I'm sorry that. I mean, it's good in a way that you have experience and you have this history of okay, I'm used to this. I can be at home, but yeah, you're right. Jessica, my partner, and I, a couple of days ago, we went to the store, and everyone was calm-ish, but also there was certainly a palpable anxiety in the air, and me being a very sensitive person, I just pick up on it all and try not to take it all on, but it's weird. It's a very unnerving feeling.
Did you find that all the shelves were empty and
a lot of that? Yeah. Which is just, I mean, I think a part of me gets it. I understand, okay, you're sort of projecting into the future. Maybe you're sort of future tripping, some anxiety is sort of fueling this need to okay, I'm going to be at home for a month. I really need to stock up. Part of me understands that, but part of me is also, feels not okay with that in a way. I don't know. How do you feel about it?
Well, what do you mean in particular? Do you mean you should think about your fellow humans who also need soap and
That's
toilet
precisely
paper.
what I mean. That's precisely what I mean. And you hear stories of dickwads who are buying tons of sanitizer and then trying to like sell it at like exorbitant prices to people who need it, which is not a empathetic, loving, sort of kind, compassionate thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of thing is upsetting to me.
Yeah, and it's been interesting to me to read, kind of when this was all first happening, the responses of a lot of people who were saying, "Oh, it's fine. It's just like a bad cold or the flu. It only affects old people or immunocompromised people, so it's not a big deal," which is, again, just come back to empathy, is not a very empathic way of looking at something that does affect so many people. I mean, you don't know if you're talking to somebody unless you know them fairly well if they are immunocompromised,
right?
And you don't know. I mean, symptoms don't show up right away. You could be a vector for this virus and spread it to someone very easily through a surface, or if you cough and it exposes to other people. I mean, I think in a way the coronavirus is a really big exercise in empathy. It's reminding us, it's a way to remind us of the importance of herd immunity and the way that we are not just meant to be individualistic.
Right. Yeah, we're connected. I love that herd immunity. And it is like such a good reminder to like sort of double down on your point regarding not knowing what people are going through, right? Like that is the key is like we can't, certainly we can like see a person, we say, okay, this person's old, right? And that person is not me, right? And I can't necessarily relate to that person's being quote unquote old. But the point is, like, we're all humans, and a person who's maybe immunocompromised or who has a chronic illness that is invisible, which are many, right? We need to learn and understand and meet that person where they are because, just because we're not experiencing that pain individually, we are experiencing it collectively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. It's nervous time, but I'm grateful that I'm still able to do this podcast. My day job is remote and has been remote for like 6 or 7 years, so I'm grateful for that. I'm lucky in that way, and I'm just trying to kind of do my best to like remind my friends and community that you're not alone and that I'm here to listen. And, this week I might try to do a virtual dance party or something just to, just to like connect in ways that, cause it like being isolated, like I wonder if you relate to this. I'm a introvert. So I do well alone, but there are moments where I do need physical contact. I do need like some face-to-face time, and I can get a little batty if I don't get that. So I'm sort of constantly aware of that as a person who has depression and things like that. So do you relate to any of that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, during some of my worst times with my mental health issues, it just helped so much to have people come and sit with me. We set up this thing called a care calendar. You can actually set this up online. Somebody came up with it, and it's a free website. And your friends, if you give them the URL, can sign up to volunteer to, take care of various things. And for me, that need was to come and sit with me. And so my friends signed up to come and just sit with me for hours per day, and they, would sometimes talk to me depending on how I was doing that day and sometimes not. But yeah, just that physical presence was so important. And I worry, and I see this worry expressed on social media too, about people for whom isolation, people who live alone particularly, for whom isolation can be very hard on their mental health.
Right.
People who are dealing with depression or anxiety disorders, who find it really helpful to go out to a coffee shop every day or have a co-working space or really value the time that they spend, after their work going out for a drink with their friends or whatever. I think, this is particularly hard for them. And I think a lot of people are, for example, right now rediscovering the telephone. There are FaceTime groups and phone calls and Skype group chats and things like that, which can't necessarily replace a face-to-face in-person gathering, but it's better than nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. And it is such a great reminder that we do need each other. We do need to, like, we are so connected. Like it's times like these that remind us of those things. And, the people who like I part of me, like I need to focus on the good but my sort of anxiety brain sometimes goes to dark places, and then I focus on the aforementioned dickwad who's being, not very helpful and certainly unempathetic. And I need to not sort of focus on those things, because then it just, because, those things I can't control. What I can control is what good am I putting out into the world? How am I living empathetically? How am I connecting others? That's all we can do.
Did you hear what happened to that person?
I heard that, well, there was a few people, but I heard one of them, he was forced by the police to, like, give them up, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was due to some help from some Twitter people who used the photos from the article to help figure out where that storage locker was.
Herd immunity.
In which he was hiding all that sanitizer.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, so how is your partner sort of dealing with this, and does he do well at home like you?
Ordinarily, no. He can get really anxious if he feels like, or anxious and sad if he feels like he hasn't made the most of the day. However, I feel like because he isn't really given a choice in the matter these days, I feel like he feels less like the onus is on him to make the most of his days. And so making the most of his days these days doesn't really include needing to go outside. So, it's like ordering new parts for the refrigerator. Our refrigerator seems to be having problems right now, which is not really a great time for that to happen. And I really hope our fridge is okay. We need that fridge to be working right now. But, and he's teaching online. He's a high school English teacher. And so the school is closed, perhaps for the rest of the year, who knows? But he's been teaching a number of classes online every day. And so, he's kind of discovering cooking and, making things that he wouldn't ordinarily have time to make because he commutes so much.
Right.
So, but I think it's really helpful for the both of us to have one another. And we have our dog, Daphne, who is so sweet. And as you may know, dogs cannot catch the coronavirus. So she's very oblivious to all of this, but she is very happy, I think, that her humans are home all day.
I bet. Yeah. What a sweet name Daphne is for a dog. I love that. Is it the same dog that's on your in your author photo?
It is, yeah.
Okay.
My secret, not so secret goal is to sneak Daphne into as many of my press photos as
I
possible.
mean, that's just genius. I think that's a perfect plan. Hearing you describe like your husband's particular challenges reminds me of, in a weird sort of tangential way, maybe, is like when humans are like when we're sort of delivered with constraints, when we have constraints put upon us, it really can open up like new creativity and new sort of things that we hadn't thought of before, or new, just new things, right? Like he's working on something else that he may have not had time to before. And, having that perspective may be a positive one. I don't know.
Yeah, this is a component of this workshop that I teach at various conferences. And I used to teach it online in this class called Ass Kicking with Limitations, which was about, having limitations and being ambitious. And so one component of that class is about these, about thinking about workarounds, because when I got really sick, one thing that I really had to think about were the workarounds that I would have to bring into my life in order to do the things that I still really wanted to do. Like writing was really important to me still, and is still, but sitting at a laptop at my desk for hours at a time was not really possible anymore. And so I wrote almost the entirety of the collected schizophrenias on my iPhone or on an iPad mini in bed. And, I'm writing my new novel, which is coming out next with Riverhead. I'm writing the entire thing. So far, it's like 188 pages so far on my iPad mini. And I'm just used to it at this point. And it's a workaround that has been useful to me. But yeah, there are workarounds. Is it Laura Hillebrand who wrote the book about the horse, Seabiscuit?
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and she has chronic fatigue syndrome, which is a very, very debilitating illness. And so a lot of the research that she does, she can't travel around the country and interview people, but she's been able to write these award-winning books. And so much of her research she's been able to do online or over the phone, which is, again, implementing these workarounds. So, yeah.
That's fascinating. How did you you're very, you use the word resilient a lot. You're clearly a very accomplished writer and a very voracious one. You're active, online. How did you get to a place where those limitations weren't just like weighing on your heart, and like, how did you get beyond that? Because like, I know for me, like, I've been in situations where like, it can be overwhelming, or like I have to deal with this thing, this chronic pain, or this medication, or the symptoms of this medication, or the symptoms of this mental illness, and one can easily go to a place of self-pitying. One can easily go to a place of just, this is too overwhelming, or like, how did you move beyond that?
I think that it's never something that I would never say that I've moved beyond it, because that would imply that I never have to deal with it ever again, or like that's one thing that you contend with and then you're just done with it.
Right.
I always also say that the thing that I'm most afraid of is despair. I think that the scariest thing the thing that I'm most afraid of is despair. I mean, there are so many things that I've had to deal with in terms of my physical illness and mental illness, and there's psychosis and delusions and hallucinations and depression and mania and chronic pain and things like that. But all of those things in and of themselves, are quite bad and can be really awful. But I think that worst thing is when they lead to this feeling that there is no more hope, and that is despair. And so I am fortunate to say that there's only been a few times in my life when I've been in despair for a sustained period of time, and I think those are the scariest times in my life. And I think that in terms of like getting through despair or I was going to say getting over despair, but I don't really think that's the appropriate word. I think getting through despair is so much just about like getting through the next, the next minute, the next 10 seconds, the next 3 seconds. Something that my therapist once told me about getting through chronic pain or just pain in general, that was really helpful. But I think it's also helpful when it comes to despair or depression or any kind of suffering is you might be dealing with that for an entire night, for example. And if you think of it as like, I have to get through this entire night of bone breaking pain, it's going to seem completely unmanageable. But if you think of it as like, okay, I'm just going to get through the next like 5 seconds, and then you get through that 5 seconds, and then you think to yourself, and then I'll get through the next 5 seconds, and then you get through that 5 seconds, and so on and so forth. It becomes manageable through that method of just like breaking down this huge unmanageable thing, like taking bites of this terrifying thing. And so, yeah, I think in terms of resilience, for me, like resilience is breaking down the despair, is breaking down the terror of not being able to get through the thing.
Right. No, that's really well said. And it is such a part of it, and I appreciate you saying at the top, like, it's not about sort of accomplishing the thing and moving on, because you're right. You're totally right. It's not, it's a thing that exists, and it sort of comes, it's a to and fro type of situation, at least for me it is. And it's, for me, I know that part of that is just an acceptance of the thing. Mm-hmm. And then in accepting is then sort of allowing me to then know it and be curious about it, understand it maybe a little better, and then that allows for coping, and developing the tools,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And there's this other thing that I've said in a few other interviews, but it's another thing that my therapist has mentioned to me that's helpful. And she talks about it in terms of healing from trauma, but I think it also comes in handy when talking about things like resilience or dealing with despair or, just healing from any kind of mental health issue or dealing with, contending with any difficult thing that might lead to resilience, is to think of it less as kind of like an upward slope and more like a spiral. So you're going around and around in the spiral, and it may feel like you're returning to the same place over and over again, because you sort of are, but you're also going ever outward on the spiral. And so you're in a similar place, but it is still a different place. You're moving outward. And so I like to think of healing that way, because it can often feel very torturous when you're like, oh God, like, why am I going through this again? I thought I already dealt with this. Like, I thought I was all better. And it's helpful to remind yourself, or to remind myself, that it's not that I'm in the exact same place that I was before, I'm a little further out on the spiral. It seems similar, but I've healed. I've healed a little bit more.
Yeah, I love that. That's really beautiful. And I like to imagine just a little guy, me, a little version of me sort of walking up this thing. And then I could see like across the way, where I was before kind of. And it looks maybe like the same level, but I may just be a little higher because I have the knowledge to like look back and know that, That's a really good image that you painted. I love that.
Good.
Yeah. So, you talk very openly, Esmé, about, dealing with mental health and dealing with mental illness, from an early age, early teens, dealing with depression and anxiety, diagnosed with bipolar in your late teens. Tell me a little bit about those experiences early on in your early teen years, because I will just say this, I know for me, growing up in an environment that felt unsafe, my sort of survival mechanism was to sort of guard my heart and kind of repress my emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But I was dealing with depression, but I didn't know it, and I couldn't name it, and I didn't have any tools. I didn't have the safety to develop the tools, right? And then when I got into my late teens, early 20s, it was just, for lack of a better term, a shit show. And then it's Pandora's box, right? Situation. So what did it look like for you? What was your awareness like? Were you talking about it? Were you writing about it? I'm very curious about that.
I was talking about it and writing about it privately, and online. So I grew up in kind of the mid to late 90s in Silicon Valley. So I was used to what was then called, the online world. Before the World Wide Web, so like on Prodigy, basically, and these bulletin boards and things. And then I kind of was on this like teen girl, these teen girls were building websites, like hand coding and building these websites. And so I was in that world. And then there was LiveJournal. And so
I had a LiveJournal.
Yeah. LiveJournal. So yeah, I have like thousands of pages of these LiveJournal archives that I saved. And so, so there were these communities, and also zines. I was very involved in like the Riot Girl and fanzine community as well. So I had a lot of like snail mail. I was getting like 30 to 40 like envelopes and packages like every day.
Wow.
When I was growing up. So there were these communities, these like kind of underground secret communities in which I was open about my mental health, because those people were open about their mental health and talked about depression and talked about bipolar disorder and personality disorders and these kind of things that weren't being talked about, say at my public school, where my best friend was the first person I ever knew who took psychotropic drugs. She was the first person I ever knew who took Prozac. And my mom, my parents are Taiwanese immigrants, and they tried very hard to give my brother and me a good life, but they also just were they had a lot of cultural stigma when it came to mental health issues, and also really felt that as long as they gave us a place to sleep and food, those were kind of like the basic necessities there.
Right.
And so they're very biased against any kind of mental health support, and there were a lot of kind of like difficulties at home as well. And so on one hand, I had a sense that I had these difficulties like depression and anxiety that probably could be diagnosed by a psychiatrist, just because I'd been secretly seeing the high school counselor. And I also had this world of like online teen girls and zines and things like that, where I knew enough to know that I probably had these problems that people were talking about. But once I actually got diagnosed, and it took a while because I had to get my mom involved, and she was very upset and blamed me, and it was a big struggle at home because of that.
What did she blame you for?
Well,
like you were doing something wrong?
Yeah, I mean, it turned out there was a history of mental illness in the family on her side, and she felt really guilty about it. But that guilt kind of played out in this anger, where she, yelled at me. Yeah. Sure. She yelled at me and said, like, how could you do this? Like, we've always given you like everything you've needed. And
fascinating. So she took it as like a personal attack.
Yeah, basically. And then when I went and saw my first psychiatrist with her, and the psychiatrist asked if there was a history of mental illness in the family, she said no. And I didn't know any different at the time. And I didn't know until years later that there was, and that she had lied to the psychiatrist.
Right.
And I asked her, why, years ago, did you say no to the psychiatrist when he asked? And she said, well, it was none of his business, which was very much, due to the cultural stigma. Things are much different with my family now, and they're very proud of me, and they're so, they kind of enact their own form of advocacy in Taiwan. And my mom really shares my work with people she knows and tries to inform her relatives who have younger kids, tries to let them know what to look out for in their kids because of genetics and things. But so when I was first diagnosed, though, I was so horrified. I mean, I didn't want to be different, and I didn't want to have to deal with this horrifying darkness that I was afraid I was going to have to live with for my whole life. I mean, that was, during the time of like Elizabeth Wurtzel and Prozac Nation, and like I had read that and Girl Interrupted, and I was just like, am I going to be living with this my whole life? And I was on these medications that were kind of stabilizing me a bit, but it only seemed to get worse and worse. And by the time I was graduating from high school, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and I was hospitalized when I got to college. And yeah, it just, for many years, it just, I kept trying to live as normal of a life as possible, but it kept getting interrupted by these bouts of just severe and serious mental illness, which I write about in the book.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I think you wrote about, I haven't finished your book. I will admit, I would be very transparent about that.
No, that's fine.
I intend to, and it's so beautifully written. I'm loving it so far. But you also mentioned the piece about, your mom not disclosing the mental illness in the family, right? Did I read that correctly?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's so interesting, and it's so it's such it breaks my heart to first of all, it's so good to hear that you had those support systems, and at that time, that is amazing to me. I when I was 18, 19, I'm 38 now. So, 20 years ago, I was going through a battle with anorexia, and, I recovered sort of more or less on my own. I didn't go into any treatment because it felt like there was no groups around. And it seems like that has changed in a lot of ways. There's definitely improvements have been made, which is great to hear. But, in I guess it was the late 90s when you were, connecting with these groups, it's really, it warms my heart to hear that existed, and that you found sort of respite and ability to sort of empathize and sort of connect and learn about yourself. And these people being mirrors for you is such a beautiful thing, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we're about the same age. And I think that like I think we're in the quote unquote Zennial generation,
Right.
which is kind of right on the cusp of the Gen X and
Yeah.
millennial. But
Yeah.
we were finding the internet right when it was, starting to become a thing that everyone used, but not quite. Not quite. Like I still remember being in high school when not everyone had an email address.
Right.
And so it was so it was so by chance that I discovered the things that I did. Like I didn't have an older sibling who like showed me the world of zines, and I didn't have like an older sibling who showed me LiveJournal or like, these worlds. Like I just happened to find them, and it was by luck that I did. So I do feel very fortunate that I had these worlds. I mean, I had friends in high school, but they were, I don't know, like I did spend like lunch at times eating alone on the baseball diamond, and like, so,
Same.
yeah.
I mean, maybe not on the baseball diamond, but certainly alone.
Yeah. And, but to know that, I could also bring these zines to school and read them, well, if I was alone or like if I was eating in the library or whatever,
Right.
To know there was this other world, because I was living in this small town that was so small that like some people call it a village or a hamlet, and and it was almost entirely white, and I was one of the very few non-white kids in the school as well, which added a whole other dimension to my existence there. But to know that there was like this greater world out there who like of these people who had other experiences and could share like books about being queer and I don't know, just like could share mixtapes with me and things like that. Yeah, and it all felt very, very important to me at a time when you're like a teenager and everything feels like 10 times as sensitive. And,
oh my God. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
No, it just like fills my heart to hear. It's so interesting the time in our lives. Like I remember connecting with people through like AOL, right? AOL Messenger and chat and those types of things. And there's something really magical about those early times, and especially to those, I can only speak for myself, but I was someone who felt very alone a lot and didn't have a lot of friends. Wasn't popular or anything like that. I played sports and things, so that kind of helped. I played soccer, but outside of that, I felt very alone and felt very disconnected from the interests of my peers, and things like connecting online was such a huge, I know, support for me and many people I've talked to on this show. And it sounds like that was the same for you. And there's an interesting piece of it, which is, there's a vulnerability to that, like being able to do that online where we maybe not have the courage yet to do it in public.
Yeah. Although it is interesting to me as well to see how much relationships online have shifted from when we were using the internet to now, where it used to be like you made a friend online, and now it's like, oh, like everybody met their partner or spouse like through Tinder or whatever.
Well, you want to hear something funny as a side tangent? My wife Jessica and I met on Goodreads.
Oh my gosh, I love that.
Isn't that funny? And this was 2007 is when we met, and so we basically just like connected over books. We were both English lit majors. She went to Berkeley, I went to local college down here, and just connected over books, and then we had a book-themed wedding, and, we're just big book nerds, so, it's funny.
Oh, yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, there was definitely a time where if you made any quote unquote friends on the internet, everybody assumed that they were a serial killer and were going to murder you.
Right.
Yeah. So
she actually did tell her parents, like, we met at this local diner. She's like, I'm going to this place. Please come in like an hour, because he may murder me. I don't really know him yet. So I did not murder her. She's well and alive and breathing.
That's good.
Yeah. So you're diagnosed with bipolar in your late teens. When does schizophrenia start sort of rearing its head?
Yeah. So I had my first hallucination when I was in college, and I proceeded to have psychotic symptoms for the next 8 years. And I was a psychology major as well as a lab manager in the mood and anxiety disorders lab at Stanford.
Right.
So I basically knew that it was probably schizoaffective disorder, but my psychiatrist was, I think, she was reluctant to diagnose me with schizoaffective disorder. She didn't really want to use the terminology for the psychotic symptoms that I was experiencing at the time. I think she was concerned about, I don't know this for a fact, but in hindsight, I think she was concerned about the stigma that it would carry, and worried about, the differences it might make to have that in my chart, as well as the differences it might make for me in terms of the way I saw myself. But yeah, in my late 20s, early 30s, I experienced a bout of a rare psychotic delusion called Guittard's delusion, which I write about in the essay Perdition Days in the Collected Schizophrenias. It's when a person believes that they are themselves dead. And it was so severe and prolonged that a lot happened and during that time, and I was finally, my diagnosis was finally changed to schizoaffective disorder, bipolar type. And so that has been my primary psychiatric diagnosis to date, although I also have been diagnosed with various other psychiatric disorders, including, what is CPTSD?
Complex PTSD?
Yes, complex PTSD and generalized anxiety disorder.
Right.
So, yeah.
So for the listeners, the Collected Schizophrenias, and correct me if I'm wrong, Esmé, there's memoir, and then there's a lot of just, you have a ton of knowledge about this stuff. And you were studying in school, so, that's understandable. But I also wonder, like, was there a part of it that's just like, okay, I have this thing, right? This is part of my life. This is part of my identity now. I really need to know everything about it. Was there any part of you that was like that?
It wasn't so much that as I decided I wanted to write about it, and I did not want to write a memoir, or at least I didn't want to write a straight memoir. And I was very interested in kind of including information from other parts of I don't know, the wellspring of knowledge that surrounds the schizophrenias. So the way I kind of wanted to create the book was I didn't want to become like a talking head that people would kind of push out into onto like NPR or whatever, or anytime like a schizophrenia related thing happened.
Gotcha.
I wanted the book to be like I kept imagining that, like a schizophrenia related thing would happen, and then, for example, like a new law would try to become passed about like involuntary hospitalization, and then NPR would invite me to come on and like give my opinion about like whether or not
Sure.
involuntary hospitalization would happen. And like that's not at all what I wanted to become or like to have happen. Like what I wanted to do was to write this book that shared my experiences, but that also presented information from different parts of like different parts of kind of like our wealth of knowledge that
Right.
exists, and to kind of like present them to the reader as a kind of bouquet and say, well, what do you think? What do you think the answer is? So in terms of the question of like, should involuntary hospitalization exist, and under what conditions should involuntary hospitalization exist? I do talk about that in my book, and it's something that's brought up in a number of different essays, most primarily in an essay called On the Ward. I mean, I bring up different situations, and I interview different people, and I talk about my own experiences, but in the end, I really want the reader to come to their own conclusion given this information.
Right.
And yeah, and so that's how I think I'm happiest writing nonfiction, is not so much making an argument and becoming that talking head. I'm happiest asking a question and then arguing against that question, and then arguing against that one, and then
Right.
yeah.
Right. No, that makes sense. I understand that. So I mentioned before we started recording that my brother, my dear brother, Tannen, has schizophrenia, and it's been something that I'm wondering if you had any of this experience, Esmé. So he is someone who has schizoaffective disorder. He's been treated the past 7-8 years or so, medicated on a number of medications. He's still, and maybe saying still is not appropriate or correct, but he has, regular sort of ongoing, I don't know what you'd call them, either delusions or beliefs that, he is meant for something greater. Delusions of grandeur maybe is the right word. He has, he reads sort of messages in license plates. He has voices from the government that says like he has this secret that he can't tell anyone, and he's never been able to tell me because if he did, he would get hurt. And I, coming from a place of not having that perspective, like what I've done as a brother and as someone who's loves him dearly, like I've had to say, look, that is no less valid than how I sort of perceive the world. Like his perspective is valid, and I need to meet him where he's at as best as I can, and understand that what he's telling me is his truth. Like, what do you have any? I guess that's not really a question. That's just like, that's where and I guess sometimes it gives me anxiety. Like because I want to like I wonder if like maybe there's a better drug that can maybe reduce some of those symptoms, right? And but it's such a complex thing, and it seems like the medical community is still very much trying to figure it out. Am I wrong about that?
Well, it's definitely true that the medical community is still trying to figure it out. Well, what do you mean by it? Like in terms of medications, or?
I guess like maybe just like understanding schizophrenia at large.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess the biggest question I would have for you about your brother, and of course, I'm not a medical expert by any means, and please do not take anything I say as such, but my question would be like, does this seem to be causing him distress? I mean, if you it seems like what you're doing is fine as long as he doesn't seem to be distressed by what he's experiencing. I mean, if he's, hurting himself, or if, the fact that he thinks the government is sending him messages, and then the fact that the government is sending him messages is causing him to behave in a way that seems self-destructive, or, seems to make him very agitated. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing for me in thinking about anybody who's experiencing delusions or any kind of psychosis, because to see the world from somebody else's point of view, even if it's not your point of view, I think is a very compassionate way of living life. I think my concern, if he were my brother, would be like, oh, like, does he seem to be troubled by this? Like,
Right.
is he living a life of suffering?
Right.
And then if it did seem to be something that was causing suffering, that's when I personally would wonder, like, is there something I could do to help lessen that suffering, such
Right.
as asking about a different medication or something like that.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And to be clear to listeners, neither of us are medical professionals, of course. I'm just a silly boy who once buried a peanut butter and jelly sandwich in the backyard, and the next day unburied it and ate it. So that's where I'm coming from. But yeah, no, I don't think he's suffering. I think he isolates at times because he feels maybe uncomfortable to go out into the world, and he hasn't been really able to hold down a job, and that may just be the reality of the situation, and I'm open to accepting that, of course, and open to sort of understanding that, like, I still have maybe a lot to learn about the schizophrenias, and also all of which just being compassionate and trying to allow him the choice and allow him to choose in the situation. It's just hard. I guess, like, so for you and your relationships, like, how has that been, you sort of dealing with this thing that to the layperson can be scary, can be, if we're putting a media spin on it, can be terrifying, right? You're going to, you're going to do something terrible, right? Which is just an awful, awful perspective. But, like, how has that sort of impacted relationships, et cetera, for you?
I think it's been the hardest for my partner, because he lives with me, and he's had to see the worst of it and the most of it, because we live together.
Right.
And he's been with me since I was 18 and he was 20. And so, and in terms of just, like, whether, I think he's always known that there was, I think in the worst of my psychosis, he's felt like there was definitely suffering. I mean, I've always had, there were times where I would be very agitated. I would accuse him of trying to poison my tea. I would call him freaking out when he was out to, like, get the car fixed, telling him that there were spiders in my brain. Just all things that, like, were very upsetting because I was very upset, Right. I mean, so much of it was frightening for him, but it was also just very painful because I was going through so much pain. It's been hard in terms of our relationship. And I'm really glad that I'm so much more stable, knock on wood, than I was during my worst points. I mean, I think right now I'm just extremely grateful that I seem to have found the cocktail of medications that keeps me fairly stable. Like I still experience symptoms and I still deal with certain oscillations, but I, for the most part, live a fairly stable life, or at least one that is not nearly as troubled as it used to be.
Right.
And at the same time, I also live with the knowledge that that could change at any time. I mean, it happens to a lot of people that their medications just suddenly stop working. And doctors have no idea why. People don't
Right.
have no idea why. So I think for me, we've gone through really hard times. We've done couples counseling. We've had periods where like our relationship was really went through really rocky times. But he's been a really faithful and loyal partner, and I think a lot of my persistence in wanting to get better has been because I know that part of it is also for him and not just me.
Oh, yeah, that's beautiful. I wonder, and I'm so grateful that you have been stable and you guys are there for each other. I guess like my mind goes also to those struggling with psychosis-based disorders who don't have the support, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how can we, as a society, a community, better meet those people where they are at?
Yeah. Are you talking about people who are maybe dealing with houselessness or
Yeah,
people
houselessness. Yeah, absolutely is one piece of it. And being in the Bay Area, you probably see a lot of that.
Yeah. So that's the big thing. There's an organization that I work with here called the Mental Health Association of San Francisco that offers a lot of resources for people who are dealing with mental health issues that are low income, that people who are houseless, people who are dealing with hoarding issues. I think it's important for people, especially people who live in cities, to support. I mean, it's important everywhere, but I think that cities are very likely to have these kinds of organizations. I think it's important for people who live in cities to support organizations such as this in their cities, and to volunteer if possible, or to donate money if that's within your means. I think that just like being aware of what resources are available in your city is important so that you can point people towards those resources if there ever comes to be a situation in which that can be helpful. I'm thinking about Starbucks, for example, has become almost like a local library or a public library in terms of becoming a public space where people go if they are dealing with mental health issues or are houseless or both. And if somebody is, I'm just thinking about because I did a speaking engagement with Starbucks a while back, and so I've been thinking about this a lot. They train their employees to really think about not calling the police if somebody is making a scene and seems to be dealing with mental health issues, to be aware of phone numbers that they can call that are more mental health centered in their city. And I think that's really smart. But I kind of wish that everybody was aware of those phone numbers, and not just people who work at Starbucks.
Right.
Because, if you particularly if you live in a city though, like San Francisco, I feel like it's likely that you'll run into somebody like this, like on a bus or like, on BART or, just on the street. And very often people just don't know what to do other than call the police. And that doesn't always lead to a good outcome. So, that's just one thing that off the top of my head.
No, I love that. That's great. It really, education, right? One, and two, finding or creating safe spaces, for people to feel like they aren't going to be ridiculed or, the cops aren't going to be called on them, etc. Like, education, like, I think that's important for all of us. Like, we need to educate ourselves because these people, that's not the right way to say it. People exist in all forms, and we all contain multitudes, and we need to be aware and be ready to provide education, provide compassion when we encounter those situations. Yeah, totally. So, to go back to my brother as just an example, there's a lot of, I think, beautiful patience and a word you use a lot, resilience in folks living with mental illness. So speaking for myself, someone who is, I have anxiety disorders and depression, and just the sort of the kind of the runaround of the initial go of here, take this drug and this will help you, and no conversation. That's kind of how it started in my late teens, and then it's a lifetime of okay, let's try this thing. Okay, that doesn't work. Let's sort of start from square one. I have on chronic stomach issues too. And so it's just I'm so grateful that people like you are sharing your story, Esmé, and people, so many amazing people on this podcast, just sharing, how beautifully resilient humans can be,
Oh, thank you so much. And I'm grateful that people like you are making podcasts and spaces for people to share their stories.
Yeah, it's the best. I love it. And because it allows others in, right? To go back to your experiences, in the late 90s in those forums and with your zines, it makes us feel seen. It makes us feel safe and allows us to relate and empathize. And that's what the world needs.
Yeah. I agree.
So let's get into, let's see, where do we go next? I'm trying to think. Oh, one thing I did read, and correct me if I'm wrong, we don't have to talk on it, but I think it's just a fun coinkydink, is I have the MTHFR gene mutation too.
Wait, do I? I don't think I have that.
Oh, maybe I read that wrong, but you had mentioned it in your book.
Oh, they had me tested to see if I had it.
Got it.
I think in the end I didn't. Yeah. Sorry.
Gosh darn it. I thought we were going to be gene motherfucker mutation buddies.
Yeah. Well, as far as I know, I don't have it.
Okay. All right. Well, nix that one known.
Okay.
So, let's see. What is your sort of current understanding of what the medical community knows about schizophrenia and what they don't know, and what their sort of current sort of efforts are? Are you clued into that stuff?
I mean, just the more it was particularly the case when I worked in psychology. At one point I was the West Coast head of a multi-site study about bipolar disorder. I the more I worked in research and the more I worked in kind of the world of psychology research, the more I realized. And okay, so first it was when I was working in the field of psychology research and psychiatry research, and then jumping into the world of becoming like a pretty serious psychiatry patient, and then jumping into the world of becoming like a chronic illness patient. I think just all of that added up taught me how doctors and researchers just do not know. Do not. There is so much they do not know. Like the in the pie chart of how much they know about the brain and how much they know about the brain, like the sliver of which they know about the brain is so minuscule compared to what they don't know. And there's a kind of wonder in that, in terms of, wow, the brain is a marvelous thing, but
right.
at the same time, it's just also kind of horrifying, just like in terms of, even now, when it comes to, prescribing psychotropic medication, so much of it is hit or miss, and we don't even know how these medications work most of the time. And if you watch like a Zoloft commercial, it just gives you this ridiculous animation of neurotransmitters supposedly increasing or decreasing. It just is very there's a lot we don't know.
Yeah, and that, like, I could see both sides of it, right? The wonder side, like, oh yeah, like life is complex and we live on this pale blue dot that's wondrous, but also very, like, weird, and there's so much we probably will never know, and there's a little like beauty to that. But the other side of it obviously is there's the overwhelming side, and the kind of scary side is like, we don't know what's going on in your noggins, and that's that can be a little scary, especially those who are struggling with mental illness and looking for answers, right? And looking for healing.
Yes, exactly. And that's why, like, as a side note, I get so upset when people ridicule people who kind of go into the woo-woo wellness world looking for answers or looking for treatments, because people do that because they're desperate. They would not be doing that if they felt satisfied by the traditional medicine, if they felt satisfied by traditional medicine, or if traditional medicine was curing them, or easing them of their suffering. Anyway, that's just a side note.
No, it's a great side note. And I think I personally believe it's maybe somewhat arrogant to believe that, like, the Western way of medicine is the only way, right? I think it's important to, like, and it's maybe in some cases a reaction to a lack of help and healing, as you said, but it's important to have to be able to explore different options, because, like, otherwise it's maybe overwhelming. Otherwise it may be too defeating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how can we talk about creating spaces, we talk about educating ourselves. What do we need to do better about our sort of connection and our understanding of schizophrenia? Because, as very well, it's this kind of amorphous thing that exists in certain cases where, we think of the houseless person. We think of the homeless person who's a quote unquote raving lunatic, right? And we're scared of that person, and we can't relate to that person. We can't connect to that person. We think of the person who's violent, right? We think of the person who is, quote unquote, to use your word, I think in the book, is no longer there, right? That person is no longer themselves, and therefore they're a monster or something, How do we relationally in a humanistic way better connect?
Well, I have two thoughts. So one thought is there was this American Life episode a while back.
I love that show.
That talked about there was this experience that I can't remember who they put through this. I think it was like some mental health professionals, and they put these special headsets on them in which they would then play these voices, and they had to wear them for a certain amount of time. And it was meant to kind of give them a sense of greater empathy for people who experience voices. And they would, kind of have them at this volume so that the voices wouldn't interfere with their day-to-day tasks and activities. And it was really interesting in terms of like, I think that people don't really understand that when a person hears voices or sees something in terms of a hallucination, that they actually hear it, like in terms of it's coming through your ear, like it's a sensory thing. You hear it as much as you hear somebody who's actually there and talking to you. And when you see something, you see it as much as something that you actually see. And so that's one thing, but not everybody is able to like wear a headset and experience this thing.
Right. So hold on. So, so if I were to say like, oh, it's all in their head, like that is incorrect.
Yeah, no, it's a sensory thing. Like one thing that I say in the book is that it's amazing how hallucinations kidnap the senses. And that's very much true. And so the other thing, if you're not able to wear a headset and try that out, is, a question that I was often asked when I was on tour for this book was, what are some misconceptions about schizophrenia? And I often said, and I will say now, is I think that to begin with, I don't think people have many conceptions about schizophrenia. Like if you ask somebody, what do you think schizophrenia is? I think most people don't actually know. So I think to begin with, it would really help if people knew what, for example, psychosis was or what psychotic meant. Because people just throw around the word like, oh, he's totally psychotic, or like she's being totally psychotic. In the same way that they throw around like, oh, she was being totally crazy, or that's totally insane. Like it's a word that means like just acting wild.
Right.
I think it's helpful to kind of maybe give people an understanding of schizophrenia and psychosis in the way that people have a general sense of what bipolar means. I think people generally know that bipolar, because it came from the phrase manic depression, includes mania and it includes depression. I think, but with schizophrenia though, there's not really this understanding of like, oh, hallucinations and delusions. What are hallucinations? What are delusions? There's, I think, a very kind of scrambled idea of schizophrenia as just like shouting a lot and, I don't know, maybe stabbing someone on the subway or something. Like It's not a very clear conception.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are like, obviously your book, The Collected Schizophrenias, it's hard to say. What are some other resources for people that you'd recommend to, better understand schizophrenia?
There's this memoir that Ellen Sachs, who is one of the kind of preeminent people. She won a MacArthur. She works in the USC Law School. I was fortunate enough to be able to give a lecture as part of the Sachs Institute last year. She wrote a book called The Center Cannot Hold, and it is a memoir about her life with schizophrenia. That is probably the best thing I can think of that has been written about schizophrenia recently.
Okay. Amazing. Listeners, I'll make sure to link that in the show notes for this episode. So let's transition into what's ahead for you? And you kind of briefly mentioned it earlier. I saw you are writing some books. You got a 2-book deal with Riverhead Press. That's exciting.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. Toward the end of last year, I signed a 2-book deal for a novel, which is coming out. Well, actually, I should not say when it's coming out. Who knows when it's coming out, and who knows if the world will still exist. But
the world will exist, and it will need your writing. It will need your books.
Thank you. Yeah, so the book is tentatively called Soft Animals. It's a novel, and it I think is I'm very, very excited about it. It'll be my second novel. My first novel was called The Border of Paradise, and you can buy that wherever books are sold. And the second book is another nonfiction book about ambition with limitations in contemporary society and contemporary life.
Sounds amazing. I'm very excited for these 2 things.
Thank you.
And what are you doing any upcoming lectures? Obviously not in the next 3 weeks, but things like that.
I did have a number of events, but like many of my fellow writers, I've had them canceled due to the current world situation. Yeah. So I think they'll probably be rescheduled. Or at least some of them will. So in order to keep an eye on my events, I recommend you go to esmewang.com, and there's a press and events section that is updated with my events.
Excellent. And the last thing we do on this show, Esmé, is we always mention, my guest and I, an empathy hero. So this is someone in our lives we know personally. Could be an author we love, could be even a character from a novel, just someone who just embodies a great deal of empathy. I'm going to go first to give you a moment to think on your empathy hero. My empathy hero is really a great number of people. We mentioned at the top, we're recording this, listeners, at the time of this coronavirus mayhem, and there is a lot of panic and there is a lot of anxiety, but there are, if you look for them, there are a lot of people who are providing a lot of great education and even some comedic levity during, what ostensibly is a pandemic and can be very scary, but there are a lot of resources out there. Kristen Bell on Instagram keeps sharing a bunch of funny sort of like videos, which have given me life this week. So look out for those. There's a lot of great ones. There's even a wonderful community on Facebook that popped up. I forget the name of it, but my friend Kathy started it. And I'll link that in the show notes. It's just basically a group that wanted to sort of focus on some positive things and supporting each other during this coronavirus thing. So I'll share that in the show notes as well. So those are my empathy heroes this week. How about you?
I know so many amazing and wonderful people who exhibit enormous amounts of empathy, but the person who is sticking out in my mind right now is my best friend Miriam, who has been checking in with me and loves to share gifs of my biggest celebrity crushes on a daily basis.
Oh, please name some of these crushes.
I cannot, because I might be doing a profile of one of them later this year.
Oh, and sweet.
That would make for a very awkward situation. But yeah, it would be exciting. That will be exciting.
I love it.
Yeah, so she is a wonderful person, and I think that I really think that more people should be like her. I think just because she's not like a public figure,
sure.
I do want to mention that I think that people can sometimes really underestimate the value of just like a brief text check-in.
Oh, yeah.
And also just like underestimate the value of a really juicy celebrity crush gif.
Yeah, I love that, and what a good reminder. Check in with your people. People, check in with them, because it's great. And I know that my wife will text. I think actually they have a Instagram dedicated to those crushes that you're referring to, and they'll even text gifts from the show Supernatural from time to time.
Oh, nice.
Because those are two hot dudes fighting demons. Anyways, thank you for sharing that. And Miriam sounds like a wonderful empathy hero.
Yes.
Esmé, remind the listeners, the Feely humans out there, where they can connect with you.
So I have a website, as I mentioned before, at esmewang.com. I am on Twitter far more often than I probably should be, and that is at Esmé Wang. I am also on Instagram at Esmé W. Wang.
Amazing. Well, Esmé, this has been such an honor, and I've really enjoyed connecting with you. Listeners, make sure to connect with Esmé online. Pick up her book, The Collected Schizophrenias. Definitely go to your local bookstore and order it. That's the place to go. And again, thank you, Esmé, for sharing. Really appreciate what you're doing in the world.
Thank you so much. You too.
Yeah. And to you listeners, as I always say, I'm here, you're here. We're here together on this wayward, overwhelming, awe-inspiring pale blue dot. We have each other. It's you, me, empathy.